You know, if you ask a young person, is there a God? And they say, I don't know. You know, I think you should have an opinion about that.
Do you have an opinion, or are you looking?
I know, it's like I'm trying to pick the most controversial topics to discuss, but the reality is that I think that these topics are the most interesting things to talk about. I don't want to be afraid to talk about them because I might lose subscribers or get too many dislikes or piss off YouTube or something like that. So,
Here we go again.
is Star Wars about God? Well, yeah. Star Wars and most heroes' journeys are often deeply religious stories. Now, you might be asking, why do you say that? I've seen so many heroes' journeys that didn't involve some religious foundation, and heroes that are never explicitly religious, and it's a fair point. Let me explain. First off, the hero's journey at its core is about self-sacrifice for some goal that is existentially greater than the standard fare of normal life. In other words, the hero's journey is about doing something great, but not because the hero wants to be great, or at least not completely because they want to be great.
Wars not make one great,
but because they are called to it. Dune is a great example. In Frank Herbert's infinitely readable Dune novels, and in both Hollywood movies, the main character, Paul Atreides, is a hyper-intelligent and hyper-intuitive young man that has some rather incredible abilities. He has a birthright to be the Duke, the leader of his world, in charge of his father's planets, Caladan, and the recently acquired Arrakis, and a more religious birthright of possibly being the Kwisatz Haderach, a living god and a messiah to the universe. He has no desire for it, to take his father's place when the time comes, but in an almost archetypically biblical way, Paul honors and loves his father and his mother. Despite himself, you get the sense that from the very beginning of the very first book, that Paul will do what is required of him. A story of a son who dutifully replaces his beloved father and saves his people. Remove the spaceships and it can almost be biblical. I mention this story because of its parallels to Star Wars. Whatever Paul wanted to be as an adult, it doesn't matter, because he has a duty. His desires for a normal life, or perhaps even a normally royal life, is forfeited for the greater good of those around him, and even the impossibly incomprehensible number of those he's never met and never will meet. His duty is one of pain, loss, and destruction. Paul is a young man that can see glimpses of his possible futures and willingly, though sometimes angrily, takes on the role of the leader to a jihad against the very man responsible for his father's demise. He sacrifices his future so that those around him can have a future. This, in a nutshell, is the archetypal hero, and even possibly the archetypal messiah. The first indicator that the hero's journey is religious by design resides in this idea that a person has a destiny which is executed in concert with their morality. By its proximity to the same story type, Star Wars, though simpler in its execution, exerts destiny on its hero, damning him to a life of suffering and servitude for his trouble. Luke does what's right because he's morally a good person.
I'm Luke Skywalker, I'm here to rescue you.
A hero is, by definition, morally a good person.
Why don't you take a look around? You know what's about to happen, what they're up against. They could use a good pilot like you. You're turning your back on them.
And there it is, our first conundrum. What is morality, and where does it come from? It's difficult to say with accuracy that the individual has the moral fortitude to look at destiny in the face and come willingly. Luke does. Paul does. But would you? Would I? They do because they are morally good people, and morality is closely linked to destiny. It's also linked to the divine and not some subjective set of cultural rules. If humans just pick these morals based off of culture or governments of the day, then there is no such thing as an objective right or an objective wrong. It's simply mankind making the arbitrary choice based off of the powers that be or the flow and evolution of their man-made culture. Morals, at least in my opinion, are unwavering and from something other than mankind, the same mankind that must adhere to these principles. As Jordan B. Peterson brilliantly points out to his students in his lectures, you think you would have been the one to rescue Anne Frank? Think again. The idea being that if a random person was living in Nazi Germany, the statistical probability that they would have been a perpetrator rather than a savior is outstandingly high. Even more diluted, the message is simple. It's more likely that in Nazi Germany, most of us would have been Nazis. And that's a chilling thought when watching normal people today call for the silencing of opposing voices with governmental control.
One cannot understand National Socialism if one does not understand Wagner.
Whether out of fear or belief, it doesn't really matter because the end result would have been the same. Most people, though morally good in general, have the capability to excuse immense evil when pressured or scared enough. If morals are man-made and simply evolve with culture or some other man-made construct, then what the Nazis did, or what Mao or Lenin or even Stalin did in the 20th century, were simply moments in time. Who are we to say that their behavior is reprehensible? Either morality is otherworldly, or it's simply who's in charge at the time, and I just don't agree with that last part at all. George Lucas seems to understand this well from his anthropology days in college. Morality in Star Wars exists because the Force wills it. He also understood that many civilizations throughout history had similar historic and religious moments, like a flood or an enlightened man that's tempted by the devil or something like that, and that those civilizations had similar heroes and mythos. That throughout time, and with very little explanation, the hero's journey plays out over and over again in mythology in the same way. Consider the near-perfect T.H. White novel about King Arthur called The Once and Future King. The name blatantly means that Arthur was once the king and will one day be the king again. Star Wars reflects some of these myths handed down from so many generations it's incomprehensible. George specifically made this story to be old myths made for a new audience, but not old myths reshaped to reflect today's audience. What I'm saying is that perhaps you can believe that man makes morals, and perhaps this nihilistic view fits into your idea of what is real, but I simply don't think that the evidence supports such a theory. People needed religion, and then the myth and tales that came after the religion to learn not to be evil. People had to learn not to sin. It was religion throughout history that taught this to mankind because without it, we devolve into chaotic and terrible versions of humans. It doesn't make us perfect, mind you, but it kind of starts to point the needle in the right direction, if that makes sense. In Star Wars, this couldn't be more clear. The light and the dark side of the Force are undeniably a religiously derived set of morals and behaviors. It's even called the light and the dark side of the Force, the Star Wars equivalent to the Church's 10 Commandments or the Buddhism precepts or something like that. Anakin describes it perfectly well when he's trying to defend the Jedi against Chancellor Palpatine. The Chancellor either doesn't see the selfishness of his beliefs at their foundation, or even worse, he does see them and he doesn't care.
All who gain power are afraid to lose it, even the Jedi.
The Jedi use their power for good.
Good is a point of view, Anakin. The Sith and the Jedi are similar in almost every way.
The Sith rely on their passion for their strength. They think inwards, only about themselves.
And the Jedi don't.
At least Anakin's looking for justification for what he's about to do. The Jedi believe in doing everything that they do for selfless reasons, with the foundation of compassion, that is. They train and attain martial and diplomatic power so that they can help others with no desire or hope for personal or material gain. The Sith also try to achieve martial and diplomatic power, but for the sake of the power itself. They believe in personal and material gain and are willing to sacrifice quite a lot to achieve it. The Jedi, on the other hand, are willing to sacrifice even their very lives for the sakes of others. Think about it like this. Consider a man who aspires for success. He starts a business, he works hard, and he gives often. He takes care of his family and generates enough wealth so that his sons and daughters will be successful and wealthy in the many years to come. Is such a man evil? Well, maybe. What if I were to tell you that this man gives money, but he makes certain that it's done publicly so that he and his company are seen as charitable? He cheats on his wife often because he believes that a successful man doesn't need to be faithful to his spouse. Such quaint behaviors are for the poor and the weak. This man teaches his kids that people are either a part of their elite class or they're not, and encourages them to spend time with their fellow elites while exploiting those he considers to be low class, or maybe even more on the nose, deplorables. He uses his money for political gain in his later life so that he can further his finances and guarantee his name's legacy over the course of history. And what if I were to tell you that this man often lies to achieve what he wants? Would you call this a good man? On the other side of the coin, what if I were to tell you that this man gives often to charity and most people don't ever hear about it? He cherishes his wife and makes as much time for her as he can. He teaches his children to respect those less fortunate and to never miss an opportunity to help provide employment or even training so that those that are less fortunate may learn to one day be more successful. And what if I were to tell you that this man, flawed as he is, just like we all are, spends his life trying to live by a religious code that focuses on self-discipline, responsibility, and giving? Now, would you call this a good man? The foundation of something is rather important. On the surface, this man is most likely identical to most observers, but the why of something matters. As John Lithgow says in the Christopher Nolan film Interstellar, don't trust the right thing done for the wrong reason. Morals are the foundation, and man-made morals, more often than not, devolve into rather disgusting beliefs. My point is, to bring it back to the original point I was making in this video, the hero's journey, at least as far as mythos is concerned, are often deeply religious because a driving factor of the overall story requires tools like destiny and morality, two ideas that are divine to their core. Like Achilles, Odysseus, King Arthur, Paul Atreides, and Luke Skywalker, their morality and destiny are driven by the divine of their respective worlds. And since the hero of the hero's journey is created with the viewer or reader in mind, meant to inspire them, then it is without a doubt that George Lucas made Star Wars to talk about God just as much as he did anything else.
Do you have an opinion, or are you looking?
Well, I think there is a God. No question. What that God is, or what we know about that God, I'm not sure. The one thing I know about life and about the nature of the human race is that the human race has always believed it's known everything. Even the cavemen thought they had it all figured out, and they knew everything there was to know about everything, because that's where mythology came from. You know, it's constructing some kind of context for the unknown. So we figured it all out. It was fine.
Is the Force God?
I put the Force into the movies in order to try to awaken a certain kind of spirituality in young people.
I had a quick message for my longtime viewers and for the viewers deciding to subscribe today. If you've been a fan of this channel for the last year, I first want to say thank you so very much for your support. I'm not a large channel, but I do try to make my videos as well as I can and entertaining enough for the general viewer. Your support means so much to me. If I were to say that I've learned anything during this last year making content for this channel, it's that if you want to talk about movies and television, then you basically have two options. Either you blindly push forward as if the politics and all the content aren't actually in the content, or you discuss it openly and not hide from it. I really did try to be the former, but I no longer think it's possible for someone like me because the content at Lucasfilm and most of Hollywood is blatantly political, just like everything else. I guess what I mean is that when a show or a movie in Star Wars is terrible, I'm not interested in pretending I don't know why to try to appear to be as a centrist, because I'm not. I hope I've earned your subscription today. I'm the Germexican. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.